The main hall of the Galactic Council was bigger than any building Jack Morrison had ever seen back on Earth. The ceiling stretched so high above that clouds could probably form up there if someone left a window open. Blue and purple lights glowed from the walls, making everything look like some kind of dream. Jack stood next to his boss, Colonel Diana Price, watching aliens from 40 different worlds talk and move around the massive room. Jack still couldn't believe he was actually here. 6 months ago, he was just another soldier doing training exercises in Nevada. Now he was representing all of humanity at the center of galactic civilization. His dark blue uniform felt too stiff, and he kept checking to make sure his badge was straight. Diana had told him to relax, but how could anyone relax when they were surrounded by beings that looked like they walked straight out of a science fiction movie? Some of the aliens were tall and thin like walking sticks. Others were short and round. One species had 4 arms. Another had scales that changed color when they talked. And then there were the Xanthari. The Xanthari looked almost human, but not quite. They were taller than most people, maybe 7 feet on average. Their skin was silver and shiny like polished metal. They moved in a way that seemed too smooth, too perfect. Every step looked like it had been practiced 1,000 times. Jack had read the briefing files about them. The Xanthari ran the biggest peacekeeping force in the galaxy. They had kept the peace for over 2,000 years. Everyone respected them. Everyone feared them a little too. One of the Xanthari was walking toward Jack and Diana. His name was Vrelax, and he was some kind of ambassador. The little device clipped to Jack's collar translated the alien's words into English as he spoke. "Commander Morrison," Vrelax said. His voice sounded like music even through the translator. "I have heard interesting things about your people. They say humans come from a very dangerous world." Jack nodded. "Yes, sir. Earth is classified as a Class 9 death world. Pretty much everything there can kill you if you're not careful." "Fascinating." The silver skin around Vrelax's eyes rippled. Jack had learned that meant the alien was amused. "And yet your species survived. Even thrived. Tell me, Commander, how does Earth train its soldiers?" Jack wasn't sure how to answer that. "We train hard, sir. We have to be ready for anything." "The Council has been curious about human military capabilities," Vrelax continued. "We have heard rumors, but rumors are not facts. The Xanthari have trained with warriors from every corner of known space. We have perfected our combat techniques over thousands of years. Perhaps you would be willing to participate in a small demonstration?" Diana stepped forward before Jack could respond. "What kind of demonstration, Ambassador?" "A friendly sparring match," Vrelax explained. His tone was polite, but there was something underneath it. "Pride, maybe. Or certainty. Hand-to-hand combat in our training arena. Nothing lethal, of course. First person to land 3 clean strikes wins. We use this exercise to evaluate new recruits and share techniques with our allies. It would help both our peoples understand each other better." Jack looked at Diana. He could see her thinking, weighing the options. If they said no, it might look like humans were afraid. If they said yes, well, Jack might end up embarrassing Earth in front of 40 alien species. No pressure. Diana's face stayed calm. "Commander Morrison will represent humanity. When did you want to do this?" "Why, wait." Vrelax gestured toward a doorway at the side of the hall. "Our training arena is ready. Many representatives have expressed interest in seeing human capabilities. This could be educational for everyone." 20 minutes later, Jack found himself standing in the middle of a huge circular platform. The floor was some kind of smooth metal that gave slightly under his feet. Energy barriers hummed around the edges, creating a wall that looked like heat shimmer on a hot day. Above the platform, an observation deck had filled with dozens of aliens. They all wanted to watch the human fight. Jack had changed into a simple gray training suit. It felt better than the formal uniform, more natural. Across from him, another Xanthari entered the arena. This one was called Trell Annis, and according to the whispers Jack heard from the observation deck, he was a champion. Trell Annis had trained for 60 years. He had beaten fighters from 30 different species. He had never lost a training match. Trell Annis moved like water, each step flowing into the next. His posture was perfect. His balance was perfect. Everything about him screamed professional warrior. Jack had seen plenty of skilled fighters in his 10 years of military service, but this was something else. This was a lifetime of dedication to the art of combat. A hologram appeared between them. It was a referee, some kind of AI that would judge the match. "Combatants ready?" it asked. Jack rolled his shoulders and settled into a loose stance. His feet were shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent, hands up but not tense. It was a basic ready position, the kind taught in every martial arts school on Earth. Nothing fancy. Trelawnus assumed his fighting stance. It looked like a sculpture, every angle deliberate and calculated. His arms were extended in a pattern that covered high, middle, and low attack lines simultaneously. His weight distribution was mathematically precise. Up in the observation deck, Vrelax spoke to Diana. "This will be educational for your commander. Trelawnus has never lost. He has studied 17 forms of galactic combat. His technique is perfect." Diana smiled slightly. "Then this should definitely be educational." The holographic referee raised one glowing arm. The arena went quiet. Jack could hear his own heartbeat. He took a slow breath, letting his muscles relax. His instructor back on Earth, a tough old sergeant named Pete, had always said the same thing. Stay loose, stay ready, and never underestimate your opponent. But also never assume you've already lost. Jack had been in plenty of fights. Bar brawls when he was younger and stupider. Training matches against soldiers from 6 different countries. Even a few real combat situations in peacekeeping missions before humanity joined the Galactic Council. He'd won some fights and lost others, but he'd never fought an alien before. He had no idea what to expect. The referee's arm came down. "Begin." For 3 long seconds, neither fighter moved. Trelawnus studied Jack with eyes that had analyzed thousands of opponents. Jack studied Trelawnus, watching how he breathed, how he held his weight, looking for any hint of what might come next. Then the Zenthari champion attacked, and Jack's real education began. Trelawnus moved with the grace of someone who had spent decades perfecting every motion. His first attack came in smooth and controlled. His arm extended in a high strike, aimed at Jack's head. The movement was textbook perfect. Every muscle engaged in the proper sequence. Every angle calculated for maximum efficiency. It was beautiful to watch. Jack wasn't there when the strike arrived. He had shifted his weight to the left and rotated his upper body just enough to let the Zenthari's arm pass through empty air. The movement looked casual, almost lazy, but it put Jack exactly where he needed to be. Just outside the strike's range. Close enough to counterattack if he wanted to, but Jack didn't counterattack. Instead, he stepped back and reset to his ready position. Now he was standing at a different angle, watching Trelawnus with quiet attention. Up in the observation deck, several aliens leaned forward. That was unexpected. Most fighters would have tried to capitalize on that opening. Why did the human just back away? Trelawnus's silver skin rippled slightly. The human was faster than he had anticipated, but speed alone wasn't enough. Technique would win this match. He pressed forward with a combination attack. 3 strikes in rapid succession. The first targeted the midsection. The second went high. The third came in low. Each strike flowed perfectly into the next. This combination had defeated opponents with reaction times twice as fast as any human should possess. Jack blocked the first strike with his forearm, the impact solid but controlled. He redirected the second strike with an open palm, using the Zenthari's own momentum against him. The third strike came in low and Jack simply ducked under it. His knees bent, his body dropped, and the attack sailed harmlessly over his head. Again, Jack was in perfect position to counterattack. Again, he chose not to. He created distance between himself and Trelawnus and reset to his ready stance. In the observation deck, an insect-like alien from the Catharan delegation clicked its mandibles in confusion. Why doesn't the human attack? He has had 2 clear opportunities. Diana Price kept her face neutral, but inside she was pleased. Jack was doing exactly what they had discussed before the match. Learn first, demonstrate later. Too many fighters let their ego drive their actions. Jack had learned patience through hard experience. Trelawnus increased his tempo. The Zenthari fighting style relied on overwhelming opponents with superior technique and tireless stamina. He launched into a more aggressive assault pattern. Strikes came from multiple angles. His footwork created constant pressure. He attacked high, then low, then middle, constantly changing targets. This was the sequence that usually ended training matches within the first minute. But something strange was happening. Something that made several of the military observers in the deck stand up to get a better view. Jack was adapting. Every time Trelawnus threw a strike, Jack's defensive response became more efficient. The first time Trelawnus threw a particular combination, Jack had to work to defend it. The second time, his defense was smoother. The third time, he defended it almost casually. It was like watching someone download a computer program and run it in real time. Jack's mind was processing everything. The angle of Trelawnus's shoulders before each strike, the slight shift of weight that preceded each kick, the breathing patterns that indicated when the Zenthari was about to launch a combination. Every piece of information got filed away and analyzed. This was what humans were good at. This was what evolution on a death world had taught them. Watch everything, learn constantly, adapt or die. 5 minutes into the match, Trelawnus was breathing harder, not from physical exhaustion. Zenthari stamina was exceptional, but from the mental effort of fighting an opponent who seemed to predict every move. He had fought opponents who were faster. He had fought opponents who were stronger, but he had never fought someone who learned this quickly. The human still hadn't launched a single offensive attack. He just kept defending, adapting, learning. It was frustrating and, if Trelawnus was honest with himself, a little frightening. Then Jack spoke for the first time since the match began. "I think I understand your style now. Thank you for the lesson." His stance shifted. The change was subtle, but every experienced fighter in the observation deck felt it. The casual defensive posture transformed into something focused, something dangerous. It was like watching a house cat suddenly reveal it was actually a tiger. Trelawnus felt a shiver run through his body. It was an instinctive warning, the kind that every warrior learns to recognize even if they don't always listen to it. Something had changed. The nature of this fight was about to be very different. Up in the observation deck, Vrelax leaned forward. His facial membranes had gone completely still, which indicated intense focus or concern. "What just happened?" he asked Diana. "Commander Morrison finished his assessment," Diana replied calmly. "Now he's going to show you what humans can do when they're not being polite." Jack moved. The explosion of speed was shocking. One moment he was standing 3 meters away from Trelawnus. The next moment he was inside the Zenthari's guard, having crossed that distance faster than most of the observers could track. His fist snapped forward in a straight punch aimed at Trelawnus's center mass. Trelawnus barely managed to deflect. The strike, his arm coming up in a defensive block that had been drilled into him through decades of training. But the deflection felt wrong. The force behind Jack's punch was enormous. It was like trying to redirect a charging animal with bare hands. The holographic referee's sensors registered the power, enough to crack Zenthari bone plates if it had landed cleanly. Several gasps echoed through the observation deck. Trelawnus immediately countered with his fastest combination, the emergency sequence taught to Zenthari warriors for dealing with overwhelming threats. 5 strikes in less than 2 seconds, each one perfectly placed to stop any opponent's advance. But Jack wasn't there anymore. He had circled to the side at a speed that made Trelawnus's refined footwork look clumsy. The human moved like he had rocket boosters attached to his legs. Another strike came in, this time a low kick aimed at Trelawnus's leading leg. The Zenthari warrior jumped, using his excellent reflexes to avoid the sweep. He tried to take advantage of his aerial position to launch a diving strike, a technique that had won him matches against opponents who thought they had him on the defensive. But Jack had already moved again. Somehow the human had predicted where Trelawnus would land and had positioned himself accordingly. As the Zenthari came down, Jack was there, his fist pulled back and ready. The AI referee's voice cut through the arena. "First point, Morrison." Jack had stopped his punch just 1 centimeter from Trelawnus's torso. If he had let it fly at full power, the match would have been over. Trelawnus would probably be in the medical bay. The observation deck erupted in noise. Dozens of species all started talking at once, their translators creating a babble of confused and excited commentary. "How is that possible?" someone shouted. "Check the sensors," another voice demanded. "That speed exceeds human biological parameters. The gravity in the arena is standard," a third voice insisted. "There's no artificial enhancement." Ambassador Vrelax said nothing. His facial membranes had gone through 3 different colors in as many seconds, indicating a cascade of emotions he was struggling to process. He had watched thousands of matches in this arena. He had seen species with 4 arms fight. He had seen species with enhanced nervous systems react. He had seen species literally engineered for combat demonstrate their abilities. He had never seen anything move quite like that human just moved. Trelawnus reset to his defensive stance, but everything about his posture had changed. His movements were stiffer now, less fluid. There was tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. For 60 years, he had trained to be the perfect warrior. For 60 years, he had won every match through superior technique and discipline. Now, for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt uncertain. The human had been holding back. Not just a little bit, a lot. And if that first real attack was any indication of what Jack Morrison was actually capable of, this match was not going to end the way Trelawnus had expected. In the observation deck, a Drexian military officer with green scales was shaking his head. This is wrong. The human is using tricks and deception. Where is the honor in that? Where is the pure skill? Diana Price turned to face the Drexian, and her expression was not friendly. Commander Morrison is fighting with honor, officer. He's pulling his strikes so he doesn't actually hurt anyone. He spent 5 minutes learning his opponent's style before demonstrating his own abilities. And he's showing restraint that would benefit many warriors across this galaxy. She pointed toward the arena. You call it tricks. We call it adaptation. You call it deception. We call it survival. When your species evolves on a world where everything wants to eat you, where the weather can kill you, where even the plants are dangerous, you learn that perfect technique isn't enough. You learn to be unpredictable. You learn to use every advantage. You learn to never stop adapting or you die. The Drexian officer opened his mouth to argue but then closed it again. He looked back at the arena, reconsidering what he was seeing. Down on the fighting platform, Jack was speaking to Trelawnus. You're really skilled. Your technique is better than anyone I've ever trained with on Earth. But I need to show you something important about how humans fight. He moved again, but this time it was different. There was no explosive burst of speed, no dramatic display of power. Instead, Jack moved at normal human speed, but every motion was layered with misdirection. He would begin to step left and Trelawnus would shift to defend against an attack from that direction. Then Jack would flow right instead, leaving the Zenthari committed to defending against a threat that never came. He would raise his hand as if preparing a high strike, drawing Trelawnus' guard up, then go low. Every fake movement looked real. Every feint was perfectly executed. Trelawnus found himself responding to attacks that didn't exist while being completely unable to defend against the real strikes. His perfect technique, built on patterns refined over millennia, couldn't handle the chaotic unpredictability of Jack's fighting style. It was like trying to solve a math problem when someone kept changing the equation. Jack feinted a high kick. Trelawnus moved to block it. The kick never came. Instead, Jack was suddenly inside the Zenthari's guard with an open palm pressed gently against his ribcage. In a real fight, that palm strike could have broken ribs, could have stopped Trelawnus' heart. Second point, Morrison. The AI referee's voice seemed loud in the suddenly quiet arena. Up in the observation deck, no one was talking anymore. Everyone was just watching, trying to understand what they were seeing. Trelawnus was breathing hard now. His silver skin had darkened in patches, a sign of stress and overexertion. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was the champion. He had trained under the finest combat instructors in the Zenthari peacekeeping force. He had studied 17 different fighting styles and integrated them into a comprehensive system that should work against any opponent. But nothing in his training had prepared him for this. The human didn't fight like any species he had encountered. There was no consistent pattern. No reliable tells. It was like fighting a ghost that changed form every second. Jack stepped back and his expression was genuinely apologetic. I can stop if you want. This is supposed to be friendly, and I don't want to embarrass anyone. You're a skilled fighter, and you've taught me a lot about Zenthari combat techniques. I appreciate that. That simple offer might have been worse than any physical defeat. It implied that Jack could end the match whenever he chose, that the outcome had never been in doubt, that he was winning not through luck or circumstance but through fundamental superiority in this particular type of combat. Several of the aliens in the observation deck shifted uncomfortably. This was the human being polite, being considerate, and somehow that made the display of capability even more intimidating. Trelawnus drew himself up straighter. His pride wouldn't let him quit, even though a logical part of his mind was screaming that he should. Continue, he said. and his translator rendered the word with a tone of stubborn determination. "Okay," Jack replied softly. "But I'm going to show you something else now. Something that might be even more important than the speed or the unpredictability." He reset to his ready stance, and this time he did something that shocked every experienced fighter watching. He opened his guard. Not completely, but enough that there were clear gaps in his defense, clear opportunities for Trelanis to strike. The Zenthari hesitated. It looked like a trap. It had to be a trap. But what kind of trap? What was the human planning? Jack remained still, his guard open, his expression calm. "Come on, I'm giving you a free shot. Take it." Trelanis couldn't resist. His training and his pride wouldn't let him refuse such an obvious opening. He launched a powerful straight punch, putting real force behind it for the first time in the match. This wasn't a probing strike or a technique demonstration. This was a blow meant to end fights. His fist connected solidly with Jack's shoulder. The impact was clean and hard. It was the kind of strike that should have disabled a human arm, rendering it useless for the rest of the match. Several of the observers actually winced at the sound of the impact. Jack rolled with the strike, using the momentum to spin inside Trelanis' extended arm. His counter came so fast it was almost invisible. A short elbow strike that stopped less than a hair's breadth from the Zenthari's throat. If it had landed, it would have crushed Trelanis' windpipe. "Third point, Morrison." Match concluded. The AI referee's announcement seemed to echo in the silent arena. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They were all trying to process what they had just witnessed. Jack immediately stepped back, his hand going to his shoulder where a nasty bruise was already forming on his skin. "Are you okay?" "I'm sorry, I thought I'd timed that roll better. I didn't mean to let you hit that hard." Trelanis stared at the human. His facial membranes were cycling through colors rapidly, showing confusion, respect, and something that might have been fear. "You let me hit you. On purpose." "Why would you do that?" "To teach you something important," Jack said, rubbing his shoulder gingerly. The bruise was already turning dark purple. "Your people are taller than humans. Stronger too, probably. You've got better reach and probably better endurance. In a straight fight with perfect technique on both sides, you'd probably win." He paused, meeting Trelanis' eyes directly. "But humans didn't survive on Earth by fighting straight fights. We survived by taking hits and hitting back harder. We survived by learning from every fight, every encounter, every near-death experience. We survived by being willing to trade damage to create an opening. That's what living on a death world teaches you. It's not about being the best. It's about being willing to do whatever it takes to survive." Jack extended his hand in the human gesture of respect and friendship. Trelanis looked at the offered hand for a moment, then reached out and grasped it. His 3 fingers were awkward around Jack's 5, but the gesture was sincere. The observation deck slowly came back to life as aliens from dozens of species began talking again. The conversation was animated, with multiple debates breaking out simultaneously. Combat instructors were already pulling up their personal devices to request copies of the match recording. Political officers were frantically taking notes for reports that would need to be filed within hours. Military analysts were recalculating threat assessments and strategic evaluations. Ambassador Vrelax stood very still, watching Jack and Trelanis walk off the arena platform together, still talking. The human was rubbing his bruised shoulder, but he was smiling. Trelanis looked shaken but also oddly energized, like someone who had just discovered a new perspective on something they thought they understood completely. Diana Price appeared beside Vrelax. She had made her way down from the higher observation levels to the main floor. "Ambassador," she said politely. Vrelax turned to her, and when he spoke, his tone carried genuine respect. "Colonel Price, I must apologize. When I extended this challenge, I expected to demonstrate the superiority of Zenthari combat techniques. I thought we would teach the newcomers a lesson about galactic military standards. Instead, we have been given a valuable lesson in humility." "No apology necessary, Ambassador," Diana replied. "This is exactly the kind of cultural exchange that builds stronger alliances. Your warrior was skilled and honorable. He just hadn't encountered human combat philosophy before. Nobody could expect him to be prepared for something he'd never seen." "Death world combat philosophy," Vrelax said thoughtfully. His facial membranes rippled in a pattern that indicated deep contemplation. "Based not on perfection of technique, but on survival by any means necessary. Adaptation over tradition, victory through unpredictability and willingness to accept damage in exchange for advantage." He paused. It explains much about humanity's recent history. Your success in conflicts that should have been much more difficult. Your rapid expansion despite being new to space travel. We're still learning, Diana admitted. Your people have been traveling between stars for thousands of years. We've barely left our own solar system by comparison. We have a lot to learn from galactic civilization. Technology, culture, philosophy, all of it. Perhaps, Frelax said slowly. But perhaps galactic civilization also has much to learn from the newcomers who survived a Class 9 Deathworld. We have become comfortable, Colonel Price. The galaxy has been relatively peaceful for a long time. We have not faced many serious threats in recent cycles. Maybe we have forgotten some fundamental truths about combat that your people never had the luxury of forgetting. A Catheran officer approached them, his insect-like features arranged in what his species considered a respectful expression. Colonel Price, Ambassador Vrelax. I have been authorized by the Catheran Defense Council to formally request information about human combat training methods. We would like to establish an exchange program if Earth would be willing. Before Diana could respond, 2 more officers approached with similar requests. Then 3 more. Within 10 minutes, she had received formal inquiries from 8 different species, all wanting to know more about how humans trained their warriors. Jack emerged from the arena's preparation room, having changed back into his formal uniform. The bruise on his shoulder made it hurt to move his arm, but he kept his expression neutral. Trell Annis walked beside him, and the two were deep in conversation. So your instructor taught you that willingness to take damage is a strategic advantage? Trell Annis was asking. His translator rendered his tone as fascinated rather than skeptical. One of many instructors, Jack explained. We cross-train in multiple fighting styles on Earth. I've studied boxing, wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, Krav Maga, and standard military combatives. Each style teaches something different, but they all share one common element. You're going to get hit. The question is what you do after you get hit. Zenthari combat philosophy emphasizes not getting hit at all, Trell Annis said. We train to defend perfectly, to control distance, to dominate through superior technique. That works great if your opponent follows predictable patterns, Jack replied. But what happens when they don't? What happens when they're willing to take 1 hit to deliver 2? What happens when they adapt faster than your technique can handle? Trell Annis was quiet for a moment. We would need to develop new techniques, new approaches. Or, Jack suggested, you could learn to combine your perfect technique with human adaptability. Imagine a fighter who has your discipline and precision, but also has the ability to improvise and adjust in real time. That would be formidable. The Zenthari warrior's facial membranes rippled with interest. You would share these training methods with us? If our governments agreed to it, sure, Jack said with a shrug that made him wince because of his bruised shoulder. That's what allies do, right? We help each other get better. They joined Diana and Vrelax, who were now surrounded by a small crowd of interested military officers from various species. The questions came fast. How much of Commander Morrison's performance was due to his individual skill versus standard human capability? What is the average reaction time for a human soldier? How do you train adaptability? Can it be taught to species with different biological parameters? Is the willingness to accept damage a trained trait or a cultural one? Diana held up her hands for quiet. Gentlemen, ladies, and honored beings, I appreciate all the interest. However, these are complex questions that will require formal discussions between governments. What I can tell you is that Commander Morrison is a skilled soldier, but he's not exceptional by human standards. Any properly trained human military personnel could perform similarly in a situation like this. That statement caused another wave of murmuring. If this was standard for humanity, what did that mean for galactic military balance? A tall alien with purple skin and 4 arms stepped forward. He was General Threx of the Corthan Legion, one of the Council's senior military commanders. Colonel Price, with respect, if what we witness today represents average human military capability, then the Council needs to completely reassess our defensive strategies and alliance structures. Your species brings capabilities we did not know existed. We bring different capabilities, Diana corrected gently. Not better, just different. We're good at certain things because our world forced us to be, but we're not superior warriors. We're survivors who learned to fight because we had no choice. There's a difference. Jack spoke up, his voice carrying despite the crowd. General Threx, if I may? What you saw today was me fighting an opponent who had never encountered human combat style before. If Sub-Commander Trelanis and I fought again tomorrow, it would be much more even. He'd know what to expect. He'd adapt his own techniques. That's what good warriors do regardless of species. But you would also adapt to his adaptations, Threx pointed out. You demonstrated that learning ability quite clearly. True, Jack admitted. But that just means we'd both get better. That's the whole point of training exchanges and friendly matches. Everyone learns. Everyone improves. Vrelax raised his voice to address the assembled group. I propose that we move this discussion to a formal setting. The Council has conference facilities available. We can begin preliminary discussions about potential military cooperation and training exchanges. Colonel Price, Commander Morrison, would you be willing to participate? Diana looked at Jack, who nodded. We'd be happy to, Ambassador. As the group began moving toward the conference facilities, Jack found himself walking next to a young Zenthari officer who had been watching from the observation deck. The officer looked nervous but determined. Commander Morrison, may I ask you a question? Of course. When you chose to let Sub-Commander Trelanis strike you, were you afraid? Jack thought about that. Yes, he said honestly. I knew it was going to hurt, and there was a chance I might misjudge the timing and take more damage than I intended. But fear is just information. It tells you something is dangerous. What you do with that information is what matters. The young officer's facial membranes rippled thoughtfully. We are taught to eliminate fear through perfect preparation and technique. That's not a bad approach, Jack said. But on Earth we learn to use fear. It sharpens your senses, makes you faster, gives you extra strength when you need it. The trick is not letting it control you. The conference room was smaller than the main council chamber, but still impressive by human standards. The walls were made of some material that seemed to absorb sound, making the space feel intimate despite its size. A circular table dominated the center, surrounded by chairs adapted for different species body types. Holographic displays floated at various points around the room, ready to show data or images as needed. Jack sat between Diana and Vrelax, trying not to fidget in his formal uniform. Across the table were military representatives from 12 different species. General Threx of the Corthan Legion, Fleet Coordinator Kress of the United Defense Alliance, whose crystalline body caught the light in beautiful patterns, Commander Vex of the Drexian Forces, who had criticized Jack's fighting style earlier, and 9 others, all senior officers with decades or centuries of experience. Kress spoke first, her voice creating harmonics that the translator rendered as precise and analytical. Commander Morrison, we have reviewed the match recording multiple times. We would like to understand the biological basis for your speed. Human muscle density, according to our data, should not allow for the acceleration we observed. Jack glanced at Diana, who nodded for him to answer. It's not just muscle, Coordinator. It's about how we use our whole body. When I moved fast in that match, I wasn't just using my legs. I was using the ground, my core rotation, my arm swing, everything working together. We call it kinetic linking. Each part of the body adds speed to the next part until the final movement is much faster than any single muscle could achieve alone. He stood up and demonstrated in slow motion. Watch. I push off with my back leg. That creates momentum. My hips rotate, adding more energy. My torso twists, adding even more. My shoulder comes forward. Finally, my arm extends. Each link in the chain makes the next link faster. By the time my fist arrives, it's moving much faster than any single body part was moving. Several of the aliens were taking notes. Threx leaned forward with his forearms crossed. This technique can be taught. Sure, Jack said, sitting back down. Every human athlete uses some version of it. Boxers, baseball players, martial artists, all of them. It's basic biomechanics, though I guess the specific way it works depends on how your species' body is built. And the unpredictability, asked Commander Vex. The constant feints and misdirection. Is that also a taught technique? Partly taught, partly cultural, Diana interjected. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've developed countless martial arts and combat styles. But because we've been fighting each other for so long, we've also learned to recognize patterns. So fighters started using false patterns, fake attacks to set up real ones, misdirection to create openings. Over time, it became fundamental to how we think about combat. She pulled up a holographic display showing various human martial arts. Boxing footage, wrestling matches, sword fighting from different cultures, mixed martial arts competitions. Every one of these styles includes some form of deception. We teach our children that fighting isn't just about being strong or fast. It's about being smart, using your brain to overcome physical disadvantages. Vrelak spoke up. This is what I find most remarkable about your species. You are not the strongest beings in the galaxy. You are not the fastest, not the most durable, not the longest lived. By most physical measures, you are average or below average. Yet you have survived and thrived on a world that should have killed you. We're stubborn, Jack said with a slight smile. And we're really good at not giving up. On Earth, the environment constantly tried to kill us. Weather, predators, diseases, other humans, all of it. We survived by being adaptable and persistent. We might lose a battle, but we'd learn from it and come back stronger. Caress tilted her crystalline head. You mentioned diseases. Your medical files indicate humans have extremely aggressive immune systems. Is this also related to your Deathworld origin? Yes, Diana confirmed. Earth has more deadly pathogens than most worlds. Our immune systems evolved to fight off constant threats. That makes us very resistant to many galactic diseases. But it also means we can be carriers of things that don't affect us, but might harm other species. We've been very careful about that. And your pain tolerance? Asked a small alien with gray skin and large eyes. She was Medical Director Lena from the Quicks Research Consortium. Commander Morrison was struck hard enough to cause significant bruising, yet he continued fighting effectively. Jack rubbed his shoulder unconsciously. It hurts, Director. I'm not going to lie about that. But humans learn early that pain is just a signal. It tells you something is wrong, but it doesn't mean you have to stop. We can push through pain when necessary. Every human culture has stories about people performing incredible feats while injured. That seems biologically inefficient, Lena observed. Pain is meant to prevent further damage. In the short term, yes, Diana agreed. But for humans, the ability to push through pain often meant the difference between surviving and dying. If you're being chased by a predator and you twist your ankle, you don't get to stop and rest. You keep running or you get eaten. Natural selection favored humans who could function through injury. The discussion continued for over an hour, covering everything from human training methods to psychological approaches to combat. Several times, Jack had to demonstrate techniques or explain concepts that seemed obvious to him, but were revolutionary to species who had never encountered them. Finally, General Threck stood up, signaling the formal portion of the meeting was concluding. Colonel Price, Commander Morrison, this has been extraordinarily valuable. On behalf of the United Defense Alliance, I would like to formally propose a military exchange program. We would send observers to Earth to study your training methods. In exchange, we would offer access to our advanced military technology and strategic doctrines. Before Diana could respond, 5 other officers made similar proposals. The Catharan wanted to establish a joint training facility. The Zenthari offered to host human instructors at their primary military academy. The Drexians requested permission to send their elite warriors to train with human forces. Diana held up her hands. Gentlemen, I appreciate all these offers. However, I need to be clear. I'm a colonel, not an ambassador. I can't make these agreements on behalf of Earth's government. What I can do is bring these proposals to my superiors and recommend that we pursue them. If you can provide formal requests through official diplomatic channels, I'm confident Earth will respond positively. Of course, Threck said. We will follow proper protocols. But I wanted you to know that there is strong interest across multiple species and military organizations. As the meeting broke up, Jack found himself approached by Trelanis again. The Zenthari warrior had been sitting quietly in the back of the room, observing but not participating. Commander Morrison, I have been thinking about our match, Trelanis said. You said that if we fought again tomorrow it would be more even because I would know what to expect. That's right. Would you be willing to train with me? Not a match, but actual training. I want to understand this adaptability you demonstrated. I want to learn how to fight the way you fight. Jack looked at the warrior for a moment, then smiled. I'd be happy to, Sub-Commander. But only if you teach me more about Zenthari technique. That footwork you use is incredible, and your defensive positioning is better than anything I've seen on Earth. We can learn from each other. Trelanis's facial membranes rippled in what Jack now recognized as pleasure. I would like that very much. As they exchanged contact information, Diana watched with satisfaction. This was how alliances were really built. Not through formal treaties and political agreements, though those were important, but through personal connections, through mutual respect, through warriors from different worlds recognizing that they had more in common than they had differences. Later that evening, Jack stood in his quarters aboard the human diplomatic ship, looking out at the stars. His shoulder still hurt from Trelanis's punch, and he knew it would be sore for days. But it was worth it. In one afternoon, he had helped change how dozens of species viewed humanity. He had demonstrated that humans belonged in galactic civilization. That Earth brought valuable capabilities to the Council. His communicator chimed. It was a message from Colonel Price. Good work today, Commander. You represented humanity well. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start working on the actual training exchange proposals, and I'm going to need you to help write them. You're going to be busy for the next few months. Jack smiled and sent back a simple acknowledgement. Then he returned to looking at the stars. 3 weeks had passed since the demonstration match, and Jack found himself in a training facility on the Zenthari home station. The room was enormous, with multiple practice areas for different combat disciplines. Holographic targets flickered at various distances. Training equipment that Jack didn't recognize lined the walls, and everywhere, Zenthari warriors were practicing their techniques with the precision and dedication their species was famous for. But today something different was happening. In one corner of the facility, a group of 20 Zenthari warriors stood in a circle around Jack and Trelanis. They were watching, learning, and occasionally asking questions. This had become a regular thing over the past 3 weeks. What started as private training sessions between Jack and Trelanis had grown into something bigger. Remember, Jack was saying, the goal isn't to copy human techniques exactly. The goal is to understand the principle behind them and adapt it to your own body and fighting style. He demonstrated a basic feint, starting a high punch but converting it mid-motion into a low kick. See how I committed to the fake just enough to make it believable? That's the key. If your opponent doesn't believe the fake, they won't react to it. But if you commit too much, you can't switch to the real attack fast enough. A young Zenthari warrior raised his hand. But this seems dishonest. We are taught that combat should be direct and honorable. Jack nodded. I understand that. But think about it this way. Is it more honorable to lose a fight because you were predictable? In a real battle, where lives are at stake, shouldn't you use every tool available to protect yourself and your team? Trelanis stepped forward. He had been working with Jack closely, and his understanding had grown significantly. I have come to see it differently, Kern. The human approach is not dishonest. It is acknowledgement that an opponent has intelligence and will adapt to your patterns. By being unpredictable, you force your opponent to think rather than simply react. This makes combat more mentally demanding, not less honorable. Jack watched as the Zenthari warriors practiced the technique. They were getting better, though their movements still had that characteristic precision that sometimes worked against them. They were so used to perfect form that improvisation felt wrong to them. A chime sounded, indicating someone was entering the training facility. Jack turned to see Diana Price walking toward them, accompanied by Ambassador Vrelax and 2 other humans Jack didn't recognize. They wore civilian clothes but moved with military bearing. Commander Morrison, Diana called out. Could you join us for a moment? Jack excused himself from the training group and walked over. Vrelax's facial membranes were rippling in a pattern Jack had learned meant the ambassador was excited about something. Commander, I'd like you to meet Dr. Lisa Grant and Dr. Kevin Phillips. They're specialists in human kinetics and sports medicine. They've been brought in to help develop a comprehensive training program that can be adapted for different species. Lisa was a tall woman with short dark hair and an intense gaze. Kevin was shorter, stocky, with friendly eyes behind glasses. They both shook Jack's hand. We've been reviewing the recordings of your match and your training sessions, Lisa said. Your movement efficiency is excellent. You'd score in the top 5% of human athletes for kinetic optimization. Thanks, I think, Jack replied, not entirely sure if that was a compliment or just an observation. Kevin laughed. It's definitely a compliment. What we're trying to do is break down the biomechanics of human combat techniques so that other species can understand the principles, even if they can't exactly replicate the movements. For example, that kinetic linking you demonstrated, that's adaptable to almost any bipedal species, though the specifics would vary based on their skeletal structure and muscle attachments. The Council has formally approved a pilot program, Vrelax explained. 5 species have committed to participating in an integrated training initiative. Xanthari, Catharan, Corthan, Quix, and Drexian forces will all send representatives to train with human instructors. In exchange, Earth will receive access to advanced tactical systems and weapon designs. Diana smiled at Jack's surprised expression. This all happened because of your demonstration, Commander. You showed the galaxy that humans have something valuable to contribute. Now we're making it official. Over the next few hours, they discussed the details of the program. It would start small, with 20 soldiers from each species training together for 3 months. The training would cover human combat techniques, survival skills, and tactical philosophy. In return, human soldiers would learn galactic military protocols, advanced equipment operation, and strategic doctrines that species with thousands of years of space warfare experience had developed. There is one concern, Frelax said carefully. Some council members worry that we are creating a military alliance that might destabilize the current power balance. They fear that human combat techniques combined with existing military capabilities could be threatening. Diana's expression became serious. That's a legitimate concern, Ambassador. But consider the alternative. If Earth develops in isolation, we become an unknown factor, a potential threat because nobody understands our capabilities. This program brings transparency. It builds trust. And most importantly, it turns us from an unknown into a partner. I agree completely, Frelax said, which is why I'm supporting this initiative strongly. But we will need to demonstrate that this program benefits everyone, not just participating species. Kevin spoke up. What if we made the training materials available to all council species? Not the hands-on training necessarily, but the theoretical frameworks and biomechanical principles. That way everyone benefits from the knowledge sharing. That could work, Lisa added. We could publish research papers, create educational materials, and make sure the information is accessible. It's not about creating an exclusive military club. It's about raising the overall capability level of Council Defense Forces. The conversation shifted to logistics and planning. Jack found his head spinning with talk of curriculum development, facility requirements, and resource allocation. This was way beyond what he'd expected when he agreed to a friendly sparring match. Later, back in the training area, Jack rejoined Trell Annis and the Xanthari warriors. Word had spread about the official program, and the mood was energized. Does this mean you will be staying with us longer, Commander Morrison? Asked one of the younger warriors. Looks like it, Jack replied. At least for a few more months. We're going to be putting together a formal training program, and I'll probably be one of the instructors. Trell Annis stepped forward, his posture formal. Commander, I would like to request something. When this program begins officially, I wish to be assigned as the primary Xanthari liaison. I have learned much from you these past weeks, but I have more to learn. And I believe I can help my people understand human combat philosophy better than someone who is not trained with you directly. Jack looked at the Xanthari warrior. 3 weeks ago, Trell Annis had been a proud champion, confident in his superiority. Now he was humble enough to acknowledge he had more to learn, yet confident enough to believe he could teach others. That was growth. Real, meaningful growth. I think that's a great idea, Sub-Commander. I'll recommend it to Colonel Price. The training session continued, but Jack's mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about how strange life had become. A year ago, he was a soldier following orders, doing his job, never expecting to be anything special. Now he was helping shape military cooperation between species from across the galaxy. He was building friendships with aliens who, just a few months ago, he didn't know existed. He was representing all of humanity in a way that actually mattered. That evening, Jack received a video message from his family back on Earth. His younger sister Katie was practically bouncing with excitement. Jack, you're famous. The video of your fight is everywhere. Well, the official council version is everywhere. They edited out most of the really violent parts, but still. Everyone is talking about how awesome you were. Mom is freaking out, though. She saw the part where you got punched and she's worried you're getting hurt all the time. The video showed his mother in the background, shaking her head but smiling. His father gave a thumbs up to the camera. Katie continued. Also, we had some Xanthari diplomats visit our school. Can you believe it? They came to talk about the exchange program and about understanding different cultures. It was so cool. They said they specifically came because you trained some of their warriors. My brother trained alien space warriors. How awesome is that? Jack couldn't help but smile. He recorded a response assuring his mother he was fine, telling Katie that the Zenthari were genuinely nice people, and promising his father he'd send more details about the training program soon. As he sent the message, he reflected on how much had changed, not just for him but for all of humanity. Earth wasn't just the new species anymore. They weren't just the curiosity from the dangerous world. They were becoming partners, contributors, friends. A notification appeared on his communicator. It was from Trelanis, sending him analysis of a new defensive technique the Zenthari warrior was developing. It combined traditional Zenthari precision with human,